The man pushes open the iron door, and before him appears a scorching sun burning the earth. But as soon as he opens another door, violent waves immediately crash down. In this place, each iron door corresponds to a different parallel universe. But why do they all look like the end of the world? What exactly is happening here? Let's find out together in the super exciting science fiction film titled Dark Matter. Jason was just an unknown physics lecturer at the university, but he had a happy, fulfilling family and was completely satisfied with his current life. Things changed when one day he received a call from his university friend, Ryan. Ryan had just won the Pavia Prize, meaning his status in the scientific community had become incredibly important. Jason couldn't help but feel a little envious. Previously, Jason had conducted very in-depth research in the field of fundamental physics, but after getting married, he devoted more of his energy to his family, so he remains just an ordinary lecturer. As night fell, Jason entered a suburban pub near his home, where Ryan was hosting a celebration for his award. Old friends expressed regret over Jason's past talent. Only Ryan truly understood how formidable Jason was. Much of the content of Ryan's award-winning essay stemmed from Jason's college research notes. To express his gratitude, Ryan offered Jason a position in his neurotechnology company, which had already received a $100 million investment. Jason was immediately tempted, but when he heard the company was located in another city, he hesitated. He said he needed to consult his wife. Caught between family and career, Jason found himself in a dilemma. As Jason unconsciously walked down a deserted alley, a masked man suddenly appeared. The man forced Jason into a car with a gun and then stole his phone. What shocked Jason was that the man not only knew the phone's unlock code, but after reading his messages, also asked him detailed questions about his private life. When the car stopped in front of an abandoned factory, the man forced Jason to remove his clothes and jewelry. Then he was dragged inside. Midway through, Jason tried to resist but was quickly knocked down. When a vial of medicine was injected directly into his neck, he only felt dizzy. He was then forced to wear the clothes the robber had prepared. Jason had no idea what the man wanted. He only heard the man utter a cryptic remark that he would get everything he had missed out on. He desperately wanted to see the face behind the mask, but overwhelming sleepiness rendered him incapable of resisting. When he woke up, he found himself in a strange room. Before he could understand what was happening, a long-haired woman entered, introducing herself as Amanda, his research project partner. He was completely bewildered, having never met this woman before. Amanda calmly stated that Jason had only suffered temporary amnesia. Then she led him into a meeting room, where behind the glass were many staff members waiting. They were all members of the project. Jason was utterly confused. He didn't know what this so-called project was. Amanda had even said he'd been missing for 14 months. She desperately wanted to know where he'd been during that time. Touching the wound on his face, he confirmed that the encounter with the masked man earlier was real. So what he was seeing now was an illusion. This was a meticulously orchestrated conspiracy. At this moment, he just wanted to get home quickly. But the person in charge insisted he undergo a thorough examination. Jason pretended to agree and then quickly ran towards the elevator. He struggled to get out into the lobby. The security guards seemed to recognize him. They even helped him swipe his card to open the gate so he could leave. Even though he had escaped that strange place, he still didn't feel safe. He rushed back to his familiar home. But he was shocked to find Amanda waiting there. She even said that they had actually been living together. Jason paid no attention to the strange remarks. He called out his wife's name while observing his surroundings. He was horrified to realize the house's layout was completely different from his memories. Even on the bookshelf sat a Pavia trophy honoring his outstanding achievements in quantum mechanics. Jason tried calling his wife's number, but a stranger answered. As expected, he had transmigrated to a parallel world. Meanwhile, in his original world, the masked man who had injured Jason finally revealed himself. His face was strikingly similar to Jason's. He wore Jason's clothes and entered the kitchen, embracing Daniela affectionately. He said that the best decision of his life was giving up his research to marry her. The real Jason felt as if he had lost something precious. He rushed to a suburban bar. He was sure the bartender would recognize him because just a few hours earlier he had drunk the most expensive bottle there. But the bottle of wine was still unopened on the shelf. The staff almost kicked him out like he was crazy. Jason began to have doubts. Could his memory really be malfunctioning? So he went to the hospital for a brain scan. While waiting for the results, he noticed the imprint of his wedding ring on his finger. This further confirmed his memories of Daniela. However, the results left him bewildered when the doctor said his brain was perfectly normal. They had only detected a neuroactive compound in his blood. Jason remembered the injection from the masked man, but he didn't know how to explain it. While the doctor began to verify his identity in this world, Jason was a leading physicist. He had won the Pavia Prize at a young age. The only problem was that he hadn't appeared publicly for over a year. He took the tablet, immediately immediately closed the news section and went online to search for information about his wife, Daniela. Unexpectedly, she turned out to be a well-known figure in society. In a state of extreme anxiety, he put on his white lab coat and prepared to leave the hospital. But right at the door, he encountered a woman hurrying in. He remembered she was the lab security guard, so he quickly turned away. He managed to leave the hospital with great difficulty. He immediately went to the art museum in the city center. He searched online and learned that Daniela was holding a painting exhibition there. Her artistic achievements were outstanding and attracted many famous people. In Jason's memory, Daniela loved to paint, but not long after their marriage, she had given up this hobby. Before he could figure out why, a painting she had created was hanging on the wall. The main subject was none other than Jason himself. An indescribable emotion welled up inside him, especially the moment he saw her. He almost burst into tears. But then he felt like he'd been struck by lightning when Daniela didn't even recognize their son, Charlie. Her attitude towards Jason was merely polite, like that of a friend. Just then, Ryan arrived. The only difference was that he was no longer the Pavia Prize winner, but had become an ordinary university lecturer. Jason's mind was completely muddled. Finally, after the exhibition ended, the three old classmates sat down together. Daniela and Ryan curiously asked Jason where he had disappeared to for the past year. He couldn't answer that question. He could only recount his life in his memories. Ryan was incredibly successful. Jason married Daniela and had a son, Charlie. Until he met the masked man, everything began to change. Hearing this, Daniela immediately clarified that they were just friends. The only thing she wondered about was that a year ago, Jason from this world had come to her and said very strange things. Each person's existence depends on choices. Each choice creates a different world. In theory, everyone is living parallel to countless worlds. His worst decision was related to Daniela. Jason felt a chill run down his spine at those words because he knew for sure she wasn't lying, yet he had absolutely no memory of it. Ryan couldn't contain his anger and thought his friend was either joking or that Jason had a problem with his mind, so he turned his back and left, ending the conversation. But a bold suspicion was forming in Jason's mind. He called Amanda to lure her out of the house and then took Daniela back to their familiar room. This was the house they had lived in together for many years. Jason remembered the layout clearly, but now it was completely different. They went up to the study on the second floor, where he searched for documents while mentioning his son Charlie, who resembled his mother and had an outstanding talent for painting. Daniela's eyes wavered. Finally, she brought up past. In fact, she and Jason had once been lovers, but when she became pregnant, he used the excuse of being busy with research and not having time to start a family, so he proactively broke up with her. Jason immediately asserted that when he learned of Daniela's pregnancy, he didn't hesitate to leave the laboratory to marry her. Daniela was speechless for a long time before silently turning and walking downstairs. Jason quickly gathered the documents on the desk and pulled her into the car. Daniela said she believed what Jason told her, but she didn't understand why two different versions of the past existed. That's exactly what he wanted to clarify. Not long after, Jason discovered the truth in the notes in the study. Jason of this world had created a giant iron box capable of interlocking and traversing quantum states, allowing human bodies to move between worlds. When Daniela became pregnant, Jason in both worlds made two different choices. One continued his research, the other returned to his family. This separated them into two versions existing in two independent universes. Jason of this world didn't accept this, so he created the iron box to travel to the other world and swap places with the present Jason. Thus, all the questions could be explained. Although it sounded incredibly unbelievable, Daniela still chose to trust Jason unconditionally. As they reminisced about their married life, their emotions grew stronger. They were about to embrace when, unexpectedly, the doorbell rang. Jason had a bad feeling. He looked through the peephole and saw that person standing outside the main door was the lab's security guard. The guard immediately unlocked the door and stormed in. Before Daniela could call the police, he shot her dead on the spot. Poor Jason was forcibly taken back to the lab. Lehan, project manager, looked distraught. He never expected things to turn out this badly, as they had once been as close as brothers. Jason's colleague, Amanda, was also extremely angry and confused. She couldn't understand why a key member of the project would completely turn against them. Just then, a police inspector unexpectedly appeared at the lab, forcing Lehant to intervene. Inspector Mason was there because of Jason's case. He had been missing for over a year and had a file on him at the police station. Yet, a few days ago, he suddenly reappeared at the hospital and an art exhibition, and now he had disappeared again. Mason wanted to know how Lehant, as the project leader, could have been unaware of the situation, but Lehant feigned surprise. He even blamed Jason for showing up without contacting him. His acting was like that of a professional actor. Inspector Mason then subtly emphasized that 3 employees had gone missing at the laboratory and that she would definitely investigate thoroughly. It was difficult to get the inspector to leave. Lehant was extremely angry. Just then, then, Amanda arrived and criticized the female team leader he had hired for being too extreme. Daniela had just pulled out her phone to call the police when she was murdered. Although the body was disposed of cleanly, doing so was tantamount to completely opposing Jason. However, Lehant believed the female team leader had done the right thing. She absolutely could not let Jason fall under the police's scrutiny because they had begun to suspect that the missing employees were connected to this laboratory. Lehant had invested tens of billions in the project, so if the truth comes out, not only will he lose all that money, but he could also end up in jail. Amanda finally regained some of her composure and realized that the most important thing now was to help Jason, the technical director, recover his memories. Without him, the project was completely impossible to continue. Coincidentally, Jason also seemed to have come to his senses. This was the outcome both sides desired. Leighton secretly rejoiced that his investment had finally been salvaged. However, Jason was also secretly plotting his own scheme. If he temporarily yielded and took a step back, he could not only understand the principles of time travel, but also uncover the true intentions of this laboratory. An organization that treated human lives as worthless surely had ulterior motives. Leighton was completely unaware of these hidden thoughts. Leighton personally led Jason to the center of the laboratory, where a huge metal box stood in the middle of the hall. Jason had previously reviewed relevant documents in the office. Moreover, he had even built similar models during his university years, so he quickly explained the internal workings. It was a device used to represent quantum superposition states. However, due to too many external interference factors, the project had only reached the theoretical stage so far. Leighton asserted that Jason's memory only went as far as the moment he received the Pavia Prize, because after that, he invented a smart material capable of suppressing all external radiation and sound, while simultaneously emitting an extremely strong magnetic field. Jason had to admit that this idea was so brilliant that he couldn't help but push open the iron door and walk straight inside. Amanda quickly reminded him that Jason was the only one who had ever gone in and come out. Before that, 3 employees had volunteered to participate in the experiment but never returned. Because communication equipment couldn't be installed inside, they didn't know what exactly happened during the process. Jason reviewed the surveillance footage before he disappeared. He saw himself calmly walking into the metal box. The door had barely closed when Amanda rushed in. Unfortunately, it was already too late. When the metal box was opened again, it had long been empty. It wasn't until a year later, 3 days ago, that Jason suddenly crawled out of the box and woke up in the laboratory. He flipped through a series of experimental documents, including his background information from this world. Amanda's mood had improved considerably. She asked Jason if he truly didn't remember their past relationship. It turned out they had been lovers, but Jason now had no feelings for her. Amanda didn't mind. She even wanted to start over with him. It turned out she was the lab psychologist, specializing in training staff in emotional regulation. This kind of disappearing without a trace experiment wasn't something everyone could easily endure. During that time, Amanda also intentionally mentioned Jason's close friend, Ryan, who was in charge of supplying the special drug to the lab, but only Jason knew its specific purpose. As a psychologist, she fully understood Jason's amnesia. Even without brain damage, extreme stress can sometimes cause psychological amnesia. He instinctively said that he was no longer himself, but had become someone else's alter ego. The statement was difficult to understand, but Amanda quickly grasped its underlying meaning. Perhaps the current Jason was no longer the original Jason, but a Jason from a parallel world. A man who had dedicated himself to research, but regretted losing the love of his life. Now, he had transmigrated here. Finally, he had a chance to start over. He wanted to do his best to fulfill the roles of husband and father. However, replacing his former self without anyone noticing was no easy feat. He couldn't even remember the names of his loved ones. What worried Jason the most was that Daniela said she was hosting a party at her house tomorrow night, a plan that had been in place for a long time. The man pretended to suddenly remember, but in reality, his mind was in turmoil. However, in this parallel world, where he could achieve great things, he certainly wouldn't give up. Jason deliberately took his son to the skateboard shop the boy loved most, and pretended to casually probe for information about the friends who would be attending the party the next day. The silly child, only focused on his favorite item, completely ignored why his father was asking so many silly questions. When the family party took place the next day, Jason not only called everyone by their names correctly, but also cracked a few harmless jokes. Ryan, one of his few friends, didn't notice anything amiss. He even felt that Jason's mood was much better than before. During dinner, Daniela asked her husband what the name of the hotel where they spent Thanksgiving last year was, because he was particularly fascinated by it. Jason thought for a while, then suddenly remembered the hotel photos on his phone. Luckily, he guessed the hotel name correctly. Having frequently interacted with the upper class in his previous life, Jason handled situations like this like child's play. His wife was very pleased with his performance tonight. She only wondered why he had become so affectionate and clingy lately. Jason had prepared an explanation that he had almost been in a car accident at Ryan's celebratory party the night before. At that moment, countless images flashed through his mind. Finally, he realized that what truly mattered most was his wife. The truth proved that no woman could resist sweet words from the heart. While Jason in this world was enjoying himself, Jason in the parallel world once again faced danger. Leighton had captured Jason's best friend, Ryan. This further confirmed that current Jason was no longer the same person he had been before. As Jason had told him this story, Jason tried to resist, but the guards beat him until his face was bruised and battered. At this point, Leighton had nothing left to fear. Leighton wanted to know how to find another version of Jason, or for him to reveal how to use the metal box. Jason had claimed that this magical box could lead to a new world. Leighton believed it and invested a huge sum of money, but Jason disappeared without a trace, enraging him. In fact, Jason was even more worried than Leighton. He also wanted to understand how the box worked. He had to return to his original world to reunite with his wife at all costs. Following Leighton's orders, the guards locked Jason and Ryan together. During their conversation, Ryan mentioned the properties of the drug he supplied to the laboratory. It could temporarily put the prefrontal cortex into a dormant state. He didn't know exactly what it was used for. Jason immediately connected this to the principle of the metal box. It could induce a state of quantum superposition in humans, but theoretically, that's impossible because human consciousness doesn't allow it. Only when the brain region responsible for this mechanism is asleep can quantum superposition be perfectly achieved. It turns out the key to activating the metal box is injecting the drug provided by Ryan. Before they could discuss their next plan, Leighton suddenly burst in with guards, saying he had something important to discuss with Ryan. Jason was left alone in the room. He was about to lie down when Amanda unexpectedly burst through the door. She had turned off all the surveillance cameras and wanted to get him out of there. Amanda deeply regretted revealing her suspicions to Leighton. Regardless of whether he was still her ex-boyfriend or not, she felt she should let him go. But as soon as they entered the main hall, they immediately confronted Leighton and discovered that all the guards had been mobilized. With no other escape route, they had no choice but to take refuge inside the black box. However, its door could only remain closed for 3 minutes. After that, it would automatically open. Coincidentally, right in the corner of the room was a container of drugs provided by Ryan. Amanda immediately suggested activating quantum superposition to leave this place. Jason had absolutely no time to rest, so he let the drug be injected directly into his body. In his delirium, he even saw Amanda inject herself with a dose. 3 minutes later, they both woke up, but the surroundings were completely different. On either side were rows of iron doors stretching to the horizon. Jason guessed this was a transit station leading to different parallel worlds, where behind each door was a separate world. Unfortunately, all the doors were identical, leaving them unsure how to return to their original world. They tried pushing one of the doors. Immediately afterward, they found themselves inside a giant iron container. They cautiously stepped out to investigate and realized that the place looked like a long, abandoned laboratory. Jason couldn't help but be curious about the events this world had experienced. As they stumbled out of the lab, the sight before them immediately filled them with terror. Large, feather-sized dust particles swirled in the air. Murky seawater surged ashore. The entire world seemed covered in a deadly layer of sand. Suddenly, the tall buildings in the distance began to shake violently and, in an instant, collapsed like dominoes. Fortunately, they managed to escape and hide inside the metal box. Jason checked his satellite phone and found that their current location matched the box's coordinates in the original world. This proved the box's coordinates were fixed. Only the outside world had changed. After saying this, they injected themselves with another dose of the special drug and returned to the spatial corridor. Jason hadn't given up hope yet. He opened another metal door, but outside was a deadly forest, making him hesitant to explore further, and he immediately returned to the corridor. This time, he didn't get another injection. Perhaps the effects of the previous injection were still lingering. The two continued to open another door. This time, what met their eyes was a world scorched by the sun, a barren wasteland. Amanda was puzzled because she didn't know if this corridor had an end. Jason explained that the number of parallel universes was infinite because each choice could give rise to countless possibilities. Perhaps behind one of these doors existed another version of themselves. Even so, the two still couldn't escape the laboratory. At this moment, the most urgent thing was for them to find food and water. Only then would they have enough strength to open more doors in the hope of returning to their familiar world. Then Jason tried again. This time, the scene outside the box was exactly the same layout as the previous laboratory. While the two were still wondering, they suddenly saw Leighton leading bodyguards chasing another version of Jason and Amanda. The two sides couldn't reach an agreement apartment, so the female bodyguard shot and killed Amanda from that world. Both panicked and hastily retreated back into the metal box. Amanda quickly realized this was definitely the same version of the world they couldn't escape from. Jason, however, didn't mind and continued trying to open new doors. But each time they appeared before them, they were faced with incredibly harsh worlds. Jason wondered how the other version of Jason could accurately pinpoint and reach the target world. After numerous consecutive failures, Amanda gradually lost her composure. She was almost in despair when they entered a world engulfed in a blizzard. Jason rushed after them, but the storm was too fierce, quickly erasing their footprints and leaving them completely disoriented. They no longer knew how to turn back. Soon after, Amanda fainted. Jason had to carry her and continue walking. Fortunately, they came across a house along the way. Without hesitation, he took her inside. Although the blizzard had stopped inside, Amanda's condition did not improve. It wasn't until the fire in the fireplace blazed up a brilliant red that her breathing finally stabilized. The next morning, snow had almost completely covered the roof. Jason crawled outside to look around and realized this was truly a frozen world. The iron box that led to the spatial corridor had long since vanished. Jason had criticized the person responsible for all this countless times. Meanwhile, in the other world, Jason, the inventor of time travel technology, had completely adapted to a peaceful life. He no longer stayed up all night burying himself in the lab. He just wanted to stay home and enjoy the love with his partner. That day happened to be Charlie's 16th birthday. Jason asked him how he felt. Charlie replied that every birthday was bland. The only difference was that after today, he would have his driver's license and wouldn't have to drive secretly anymore. Not long after, Jason arrived at class and realized that none of the students were paying attention. He angrily smashed a glass bottle in his hand to attract attention. Then he noticed that many students hadn't brought their books, pens, or paper. They were just glued to their laptops watching videos. He immediately turned and left. As someone who had previously worked on top-tier scientific projects, Jason felt that teaching these students was a complete waste of his life. So, he immediately submitted his resignation to the principal. Afterward, he returned to his luxurious apartment. This was Layton's residence, the head of the laboratory. Unfortunately, in this world, he was just a playboy, living without purpose. Moreover, his beloved grandfather had recently passed away, leaving him completely without motivation. Jason had not only collaborated with Layton for many years in another world, but they were also college classmates. Therefore, Jason immediately stated his purpose. He wanted Layton to invest in his research project. At first, Layton showed no interest. Jason took Layton to an abandoned factory without explaining what he was researching. Jason only gave Layton a special vial of medicine to use. Meanwhile, in the icy world, Jason finally woke Amanda from her coma. Upon learning that the metal box had been buried under the ice and snow, she deeply regretted her impulsive actions from the previous day. This near-death experience reminded her of a time many years ago when she and her father went skiing and were caught in a severe blizzard. After hearing this, Jason had an idea. He asked if she had thought the same thing in the hallway yesterday. Amanda nodded. The passage through the endless worlds, with no end in sight, felt like being trapped in a suffocating snowstorm. Jason immediately understood. Those iron doors, seemingly random, leading to strange worlds, were in fact likely controlled by their thoughts. The appearance of different worlds was a true reflection of their emotional state at the moment they opened the doors. Yesterday, Amanda thought of a snowstorm, and they opened a snowstorm world. Jason thought of another version of himself trapped in the lab, and the door revealed that scene. Perhaps this was the correct method to control the iron box. The more Jason thought about it, the more excited he became. Finally, he had found a way to return home. Meanwhile, the other version of Jason had brought Layton to the giant iron box. As soon as they stepped through the iron gate, the surroundings instantly transformed into a long, dark tunnel. His eyes widened, but even more unbelievable things awaited them. Jason said he would take Layton to experience an ideal world, on the condition that Layton cast aside all distracting thoughts. Jason understood perfectly what Layton longed for. All Layton needed was to follow him. Meanwhile, in the icy world, Jason and Amanda had left the log cabin. To return to their original world, they absolutely had to find the iron box buried under the snow. Because the satellite navigation system had malfunctioned in the harsh weather, Amanda devised another plan. The iron box had fixed coordinates and was itself a massive magnetic field. So relying on the compass, they finally located the box in the thick snow. After injecting a special drug, they successfully entered the passage. The path home was now right before them. But Jason wasn't in a hurry. He glanced at his watch and sadly said that today was Charlie's birthday. At the same time, another version of Jason led Layton out of the metal box in a parallel world where he reunited with his deceased grandfather. Jason proudly stated that he could transport anyone to an ideal world. Layton quickly recognized the immense commercial value hidden within and was willing to pay any price to support the project. In this world, Jason Jason still felt a sense of accomplishment, believing he was born to be a researcher, unaware of his wife's despair at home. Today was not only Charlie's birthday but also the anniversary of another child's death. For 16 years, Jason had never been absent as a father. Only today, he had left home early in the morning and never returned. But Daniela didn't know that her real husband was in the tunnel between worlds, in a different way, commemorating their son. Jason told Amanda that when his wife was pregnant, the doctor had said the unborn child had a serious heart problem. Despite this, they were determined to have the child. They subsequently underwent several major surgeries, but ultimately, the child's life could not be saved. To this day, Jason still couldn't get over his anger. He wondered why the fake Jason wouldn't stay peacefully in the lab, but instead came to swap lives with him. Amanda said that he had a strong character and that every decision he made was carefully considered. Jason was startled. After all, he was just a poor teaching assistant and not worth the other person going to such lengths for. Amanda pondered, wondering if there was something he had that the other Jason didn't. Jason suddenly realized that what the other Jason craved was his wife and children. Meanwhile, Daniela and Charlie were still immersed in sadness over the absence of their husband and father when suddenly the door to the room opened. Jason abruptly walked in. He explained that he was late because he was preparing a gift for Charlie. Then he took out a small box. Charlie, who had been gloomy, was delighted when he opened it and found a car key inside, because his biggest dream was to own a car after getting his driver's license. Daniela, standing behind them, was also taken aback. Their family's financial situation simply didn't allow for such a gift. Jason frankly stated that he felt his achievements shouldn't stop there. Therefore, he resigned from his teaching assistant position. At the same time, he used his college invention to attract investment. He also encouraged his wife to pick up her paintbrush again and persevere in pursuing her dream of becoming an artist. Meanwhile, Jason finally understood how to apply the principles of space. Unexpectedly, as soon as the iron door opened, a massive amount of seawater rushed in. It turned out that this parallel world was facing an apocalyptic tsunami. Jason and Amanda struggled with all their might. Only when the iron box began to sink and the space inside gradually filled with seawater did they manage to close the door with great difficulty. They finally returned to the space tunnel. Jason gasped for breath and wondered if the previous method had been flawed. Amanda suggested that his mental state was under too much pressure, leading to a misalignment in connecting the worlds. So she advised him to rest for a night, adjust his emotions, and then try again. Amanda was truly a psychologist. She always knew how to find the right topic to lighten the atmosphere. She suddenly remembered the volunteers who had participated in the iron box experiment, including a woman named Vane, who was also her close friend. While chatting, they both fell asleep without realizing it. Near midnight, Jason woke Amanda up because they hadn't eaten or drunk anything all day. They needed to quickly find a food source. Once again, they pushed open an iron door. A very familiar-looking laboratory appeared before them. However, there was no one around, and even the elevator was unusable. Amanda said that the laboratory only went into such a state of lockdown when a serious incident occurred. They wondered what had happened here. The two of them casually walked into a restroom where someone seemed to be lying on a bed, but when he pulled the leg out to check, it was a mummified corpse that had been dead for many years. A bad feeling welled up in Jason's heart. He was about to turn back to the metal box when the lights at the end of the hallway suddenly came on. In these circumstances, encountering a living person might not necessarily be a good thing. As the figure approached, Amanda's face showed astonishment. The person before her was Blair, her long-lost best friend. After Blair voluntarily participated in the experiment with the iron box, she had completely disappeared. Unexpectedly, the two of them had met again in another world. After they ate, Blair began to recount her experiences. Initially, she, like Amanda, constantly traveled through parallel dimensions, until she discovered that this world had been inadvertently manipulated by another version of Blair, becoming a breeding ground for mutated insects that devoured everything. These creatures had an incredibly high reproductive rate and no natural predators, so they quickly spread throughout the entire world. Amanda was curious why Blair still wanted to stay there, but Blair's expression suddenly turned gloomy, and she said that the special medications she had brought with her had run out, and the drugs in the laboratory had been taken by the staff. However, that wasn't the main reason. Blair had traveled through many parallel worlds. In most of them, the other versions of herself had families and their own lives. This made her feel incredibly lonely, as if the whole world was slowly pushing her away. Therefore, Blair chose to stay in this small room in the midst of the apocalypse and no longer wanted to try venturing into new worlds. Amanda felt a deep sense of guilt, thinking she shouldn't have invited her friend to participate in the box project in the first place. Amanda tried to persuade Blair to leave with her, but Blair immediately refused. Blair even reminded Amanda that following Jason might not necessarily bring her the life she desired. Before they parted, Blair gave Amanda her notebook containing records of her her time-traveling experiences. At the same time, Blair warned them that to enter an ideal world, not only focus but also fear, hesitation, or even subconscious desires would influence the direction and outcome of that world. When they returned to the space tunnel, Amanda became extremely depressed. She believed that Blair's life had been completely ruined by that iron box. She began to hate the other version of Jason. Clearly, he could have returned to his original world to prevent the experiment participants from entering the box, but he did nothing. He just gave up. Jason understood that version's choice. Years ago, when his girlfriend was pregnant, he thought long and hard before finally choosing family over the lab. He tried to be a good husband and father to prove his decision was right. The other Jason, however, chose the lab. He was on a path with no escape. Only later did he realize that choice wasn't worth it, so he decisively cut ties with his old world. At the end of their conversation, he suddenly thought of a brilliant way to control the box. When people write, their concentration is at its highest. Amanda suddenly realized that instead of just thinking in their heads, they could actually write down the world they wanted to go to. When Jason opened the door again, the familiar scene unfolded before him, deeply moving him. This was the place where the other version of him had kidnapped him. Everything was still vividly clear. He almost burst into tears because this place was definitely his world. But when the two of them stepped out of the abandoned factory, they found not a soul in sight. Amanda immediately realized this was another apocalyptic world and suggested they quickly return to the metal box. But Jason refused. It was rare for him to encounter a world like this, so he decided to go home and see what was happening. Outside the shopping mall, he found an abandoned car. On the way there, he didn't encounter a single living person. His unease grew even greater. When he knocked on the door, he was surprised to hear a voice from inside. Daniela, with a haggard face, opened the door and was astonished to find her husband had just been carried away. Jason, bewildered, stepped inside and only then realized that a strange virus had appeared in this world. Just then, some soldiers from the epidemic control unit appeared on the street, confirming that Jason hadn't been infected and advising him to go home quickly. Meanwhile, Jason discovered that his wife and children had contracted the disease. At the same time, medical staff informed him that the hospital was overwhelmed. Therefore, he was forced to take out the syringe to ensure the patient could pass away peacefully. Amanda advised him to leave, warning that contracting the virus would cause serious trouble, but Jason remained steadfast. After all, the woman before him was still his wife. He looked at the family photo on the wall and slowly recalled past memories. Daniela's mood calmed down and she took the euthanasia pills. Returning to the metal box, Jason was consumed by sorrow. The woman he had just seen was indistinguishable from his wife. They shared the same appearance and memories, differing only in their ultimate fate. Amanda began to summarize this time-traveling journey. Jason wrote on a piece of paper, "I want to see my family." But when he opened the door, he still carried a heavy, emotional burden. His mother had died of illness, leaving him subconsciously fearful that his own family would suffer the same fate. After hearing her analysis, he fell into deep thought. Then, once again, he opened the metal door. This time, they finally arrived in a normal world, where the surroundings were exactly as they existed in their memories. Jason immediately became excited. Had he really succeeded this time? The film ends here. Goodbye, and see you in the next part.